hopeful of the preliminary examination. That's good. That's a positive note. I think you are giving the exam for the first time? Mains, or you have given already? If you are here, obviously it was not successful, right? See, I don't know how many of you really read the question paper, or how many of you really follow the instructions that are given in the question paper. I am not sure. My voice is audible, right? The reason I find is that many of the students get less marks, whether they are talking about public administration, optional or general studies, whatever it is. And they always complain that this is not there, that is not there, this is not, no, I have written everything and I am not getting the marks. The basic reason why it is happening is that you are not directly focusing on the issue that the examiner wants you to respond to. That means you are beating around the bush, you are not touching the bird. And as long as you beat around the bush, the bird flies. That's what happens with the marks also, your answers also, that's what happens. So basically what the examiner looks at the answer scripts of a candidate is something that is already mentioned in the syllabus, that is already mentioned in the papers also. But what happens is, nobody looks at the instructions that are given in the question papers. Because, in our institutes and other places, we say you'll have to write 25 questions, you'll have to write in 200 words, etc., etc. That's what we indoctrinate your mind. And you think that the moment you see the paper, you think that I know what to write. But how to write is not seen. So first what I thought is I will read out for you something from the UPSC's notification itself. Maybe that will clarify what or how you should go about it. So this is a notification from the Gazette, UPSC Gazette itself. And with regard to Part B main examination, what they have mentioned. They said that the main examination is intended to assess the overall intellectual traits and depths of understanding of candidates rather than merely the range of their information and memory. That means it's not a memory test. It is not telling how much of information you possess. Suppose you want to write something about President of India, it is not the question of how much of information you have about the President of India. If they ask you President is a rubber stamp, elucidate, then what you have to do is you have to simply say why President is a rubber stamp, that's all. You need not have to tell you that in this situation he is not a rubber stamp, in that situation he is not a rubber stamp. The question is very clear, they say he is a rubber stamp. Then you have to establish that he is a rubber stamp. So that's what they say. It is not just the range of information and memory. That is first. The second part, the nature and standard of questions, right? In the general studies papers will be such that a well-educated person will be able to answer them without any specialized study. People tell me, sir, very general answer Rastunam, sir. Are you an expert in law to write a specific answer? Are you arguing a case in a court? You are a generalist. Your service is a generalist. Generalist service means you should know about many things, but not in depth. You should know where what is necessary, where what is not necessary. So clearly you should have a wider knowledge, but not necessarily deeper knowledge. You should know where to use a computer, but need not know how the computer works. You need not know the coding language. You know what are the results that you want, what you want to get out of the computer, or data that is there, you need that. You need not know how it works, how many nuts are there, how many bolts are there, how many screws are there. None of these are necessary. You have to write an answer as a well-educated person will be able to answer them without any specialized study. Please mark my words. Okay? A general understanding is more than enough. Next thing. It will be such as to test a candidate's general awareness of variety of subjects, which will have relevance for the career of a civil service. Can you tell me what is not relevant for a civil service? Is there any one area which is not which does not come under the civil services ambit. Everything comes under, is it not so? So you should know everything. Right? Then see. The questions are likely to test the candidate's basic understanding of all relevant issues and ability to analyze and take a view on conflicting socio-economic goals. Take a view on conflicting socio-economic goals. Not two views, not opposing views. You have to have a stand of your own. I say, I agree with this, I disagree with this. If I disagree with this, why would I disagree? If I agree with this, why would I agree? Conflicting socio-economic goals, objectives and demands. People make a lot of demands, people make a lot of goals, objectives. Whether they are right or not, you should have an opinion on that. The candidates must give, the last part, how your answer should be. The candidates must give relevant, meaningful, succinct answers. Relevant, meaningful, succinct answers. Not necessarily very elaborate. Your answer should be comprehensive enough. It should be relevant to the issue that is raised. And you should have a meaning for why you are arguing in favor of it. Actually, we always say that, UPSC examines from this point of view. These are the three things that UPSC looks at. I think you have written the exam, right? They have given you the...
Yes.
You will find that, elaborate answers have been given. That's what I was telling you. There is nothing there for me to discuss. What is there to discuss? Every aspect has been taken up very elaborately. If you write an answer like this, definitely you are not going to get marks. The reason is that you don't have the time. Just count the words that have been given for one question,
Yes.
one answer. One question, one answer, how many words have been used? One paragraph itself will almost be 150 words. You don't count like that, just one count and average. One line, how many words are there?
10 words.
10 words per line. See how many lines it should be? Not more than 13 lines. 15 lines. Maximum 25 lines. Right? So how will you get marks? How can you write?
It's going over 65.
Then why do we do this? The only thing is, this is not just a test. This is a process where we are trying to give you some information which you might have missed. The purpose of test is to one, to help you write a precise answer. Second thing is that some of the aspects which have been ignored either in the class or because of some time constraint or something else, or something which has cropped up very early, very latest, which has not been included. These can be included in these answers. Now if you see the supplementary readings and other things, you will find that a lot of information is there. So what you have to do is, first thing is, when you go home, you write an answer, and what you try to do is you try to incorporate, okay, this point is relevant, and the other point is relevant. So you can make a comprehensive answer. That will be a succinct answer. What do you mean to say by succinct is that? You have to write an answer that is succinct. It should contain everything, maximum possible. Right? So this is, a purpose is to tell you that this could be an important area, tell you that this is the information that you may need, you may be missing. So keep this with you, file them with you, so that whenever these issues, say for example, Women Reservation Bill, for example, Universal Civil Code, something like that, is there a lot of information has been given. So this could be a material that you can read. We try to make it in such a way so that you need not hunt for any additional material that way. You file this, that way best. Okay? Second thing is that when you are writing answers, one more thing that you should be very clear about is that every question that you see in the UPSC has what is called an operative word is there always. elucidate, explain, illustrate, evaluate, analyze, comment, discuss. These are the words that are there. And each word has a specific meaning. When he says, say for example, one of the most often used word is comment. When a question is tagged with a line comment, the basic idea is that you should form an opinion of yourself, of that particular issue. Right? So first thing is, you would start your answer, if you want to build a relevance, you would start your answer saying that there is an issue. Say for example, Women's Reservation Bill. Right? There is a contentious issue. Right? Or say for example, the president, right now the President of India elections. Right? So there is a question saying that President is a rubber stamp. Right? So now if you are commenting, the idea is that, do you agree with the idea that he is a rubber stamp or not? You have to build, first of all, that one, your opinion. You say, yes, he is a rubber stamp. Then you build the relevance. If he is a relevance, why? So what you would say is that, right, the constitution has provided a dual arrangement of executives. One is a de facto, other is a de jure. Then we have a de facto head has all the responsibilities. He is accountable to the Parliament of India. And though India is a federation, the federation cannot act on the words of the de jure head. De facto head. Therefore, a de facto is also, de jure is also necessary. So you build up an answer only to say that yes, he is a rubber stamp. Right? So if you want to cite some examples, you can cite the example of, say for example, V.V. Giri, you can cite. Suppose you want to cite the example of, there are so many presidents, right? But we won't. We talk about Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad. Those presidents who have been very silent and simply did whatever the Prime Minister wanted to do. That means we'll have to understand the presidential history also. What are the important things that happened in the presidential scenario? Then you can always say, by these instances, we can assure that the president is nothing but a rubber stamp. You are given an opinion. Yes, agreed. That is a rubber stamp. Why is a rubber stamp? Constitutional position you have given relevance. Then you have analyzed the real situation, and then you have concluded saying that your presentation is that because of all these cases, there cannot be any doubt that he is not a rubber stamp. Over. Don't bring anything else. On the other hand, you disagree that he is not a rubber stamp. You say that no, he is not a rubber stamp. Then again you take up the same issue, the interpretation. You say that though the constitution has provided for two dual executive, you find that the Prime Minister of India does not have any powers listed under his position. On the other hand, all the powers, executive powers, legislative powers, financial powers, judicial powers, then emergency powers, military powers, everything has been listed to the President of India. And the President of India only will have to act as per the advice given by the Prime Minister of India. That too, as long as the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers enjoys the confidence of the House. The moment the Prime Minister of India has lost the confidence of the House, and he gives a resolution, the Council gives a resolution, it is not mandatory for the President of India to follow the advice given by the
Ex-Prime Minister.
Not say ex-Prime, the Council of Ministers. Therefore, he is not a rubber stamp. If you want to ascertain that, we also say the President also has certain other powers in legislative matters. He has the power of reconsideration. Yes? That's right. He has the power of returning a bill. More so, he has the power of veto. There are no guidelines as to when you should use this. At any point of time, on any legislative action, he has the privilege of using any of this. When he has a discretionary power like this, how can you call him as a rubber stamp? A bill comes to me, I will veto it. If the bill has come to me, that means that the council has approved it, the parliament has approved it, and then it has come to me. It will not become a law unless until I approve it. I am refusing it. Finish. Am I a rubber stamp? Don't say that, this can be overruled. Why should I mention that? And overruling a presidential veto is not easy. Because the bill will have to return to the same house of origin. It has to be passed again by both houses. The legislative time is very little. Therefore, it is not possible usually for the parliament to take up that same bill again, discuss it and pass it through the legislative process. That's why people, when they talk about vetoes, they say there are 3 vetoes. There are not 3 vetoes. It is one veto that acts in 3 different manners. The one is called as a qualified veto. The veto is valid as long as the parliament does not override it. If the parliament overrides it, it's lost. So this is another reason you can say that he is not a rubber stamp. Then you can cite some examples. I usually mention the postal bill during Jail Singh's time. Rajiv Gandhi has put that, refused. K.R. Narayanan has refused. Shankar Dayal Sharma has refused. So in these circumstances, how can you say that President of India is a rubber stamp? One thing, I am asking a question and I am giving an answer in the form of a question. Please never question the examiner. You don't write, how can you say? No, don't write that. That is not expected. So you can simply say, in these circumstances, we can conclude very clearly that President of India is not a position of rubber stamp. Information is same. Interpretation is different. Interpretation will depend on what?
Analysis.
No. Interpretation, analysis will depend on your position. Is your position agreeing or your position disagreeing? You are disagreeing, this is the answer. You are agreeing, this is the answer. No, which one is correct, which one is wrong? Both are correct. Then who should get more marks?
Both will get.
The equal marks. So there's nothing to, people always tell you, what they say is that you cannot go against the government. If you go against the government, they will not give you marks. See? Not necessary. Government is also run by human beings. To err is human. Everybody will commit a mistake. And innovation, clarity of mind, ideas are not only the, what you can say, the monopoly of the government of India. There is nothing wrong. You have to be, what you call, dispassionate about issues, objective. You have to give an answer that is objective. Based on reasons, you will get your marks. There is nothing like that, if you write for everything, I agree with whatever the question says, they are not going to give you 300 out of 300. Are they? If they are going to do that, everybody will get that. So they are not looking at that, they are looking only at your thinking capacity, your ability to analyze issues, find out and say, okay, this is what, this way this person is capable of thinking rationally on a very contentious issue. This issue is a very debatable issue. He is thinking very cool, very calculative mind he is thinking, and he is analyzing all the pros and cons, and then he is coming out with a solution for that. That is what they do. So as a matter of fact, when is your personality test? Usually after the mains is over. In fact, your personality test is being done right from the day when you are writing your mains. Your answers themselves speak how organized you are, how systematic you are, how rational you are in thinking, how calculative, how succinct thinking is there. One point to another point to the second point, third, fourth, fifth. If you are continuously reading like that, there is no way that, you are completely organized. Your ability to think in an organized manner, present your points, is clearly seen. That itself is a personality. Usually, UPSC examiners, what they do is, after the UPSC does is, they do all that numbering and all, coding and all, everything is done, and they attach another paper to it, another sheet. From the sheet, what happens, on that sheet, the examiner will evaluate your personality and make his findings. That sheet is not, it's completely confidential. That sheet is there. One question I'll ask you. Suppose if the government recommends, state government recommends a disciplinary action on a civil servant, what is the procedure? State government wants an action. There was one girl in UP, what was her name? Durga Shakti Nagpal. UP government recommended an action. Akhilesh Yadav. What is the procedure that was followed? Did they take action?
This temporarily suspended.
So suspension is not an action. Never think that suspension is a discipline. Suspension is not a disciplinary action. Suspension is the process of moving you from the position you are holding to another, so that you will not tamper with the events that are there in the. Suppose I am working as a collector and some allegation has been made on me. If I am continuing to be at the same position, I will tamper the records. Right?
Yes.
So what should be done? First I should be moved from that position to another position. So I am moved to another position, or I am suspended. I am not given any charge for a month, 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is. Meanwhile, other people who are investigating can come, investigate, get the records and go in. Again I am reinstated back. So suspension, please never think that it's a disciplinary action. Even a person is suspended for 3 months, he will get his salary. Okay? Right?
Yes.
You can't do anything else. If at all, if you want to take any action, what you have to do is, the state government will have to complain to the Ministry Home Affairs, DOPT or Home Affairs, whatever it is. And DOPT will consult the UPSC and then they will think of a disciplinary action. Why should they consult the UPSC? Why should they consult the UPSC? You are working, say for example, for 15 years or something like that, something wrong has happened. Now the government wants to take action, and now they are consulting the UPSC after 15 years of your service. What can UPSC do? They have a glimpse of your personality. They would check your personality and say, no, he is not that kind of a person, or he is that kind of a person, or whatever it is. They would make some recommendations on the personal claims that are there. So your life story is there with you.
Sir, I have one question regarding that. There were 2 questions in the last meeting regarding Coelho case and McBride Commission.
Coelho case and?
McBride Commission. If you are intellectually dishonest, we will write some answer. They will capture our personality in that we are intellectually dishonest in that evaluations.
Yes, that will be repeated. See, if you are lying, you should be consistently lying. Usually what happens in some of the personality tests, a variety of questions are administered. The same question is repeated several times. Usually what happens is that one person gives an answer at one particular place, dishonest answer. He cannot continuously give the same dishonest answer everywhere. The randomization is there. So definitely the personality will be identified. Don't worry about that. They have their own mechanisms. And they have been, you are writing the civil services now. Maybe another 5 years you will write maximum, let us say. But the UPSC has been doing this kind of a process from so many years. So they would have established some kind of a pattern, some kind of a method to identify what is a dishonest answer or what is a. Don't worry about their evaluation process. What I would like to tell you is that their evaluation process of a candidate is to the possible extent is faultless. I don't say it is no errors are there.
But some of the toppers of the rank who get to say that write anything as far as possible, at least you will get 1 or 2 marks in that answer.
See, it's not like that. It's not like that. If they are the toppers, I don't know. That's why I think maybe that is the reason why the government is running like this. I don't think so. See, do you think the topper has given you an honest answer?
In an interview,
Do you really think he would have given an honest answer? Sincere answer?
We don't,
Huh?
we don't know.
No.
No, sir, they do often like we didn't study anything, or else we studied for 18 hours a day.
Huh?
Those doesn't seem to be honest.
They are honest?
No,
Huh.
most of the times.
See, I know of certain guys who have got first rank. They have been working in the Indian Police Service. They have been in the Training Police Academy. Kadpa Karthik Sridhar, Venkatesham, Purra Venkatesham, and several other people have been there. Your recent Tina Debbie and other people also have been getting some kind of a service and all. They have been working and now while working, tell me how would they work for say their working hours are from 8 hours in a day, right? So you add 1 hour this way, that way for travel. If they are working in Delhi or some other place, so 10 hours gone. The balance is 14 hours. How can they read for 18 hours? First thing, logistics. Don't they need to sleep? Right? So how much time will take away for sleep?
8 hours.
Gone? So how did they read for 18 hours? It's just a public image they are projecting. Sridhar and Karthik, they have been in the police academy. You know how the police training starts? After finishing the police training, they studied. It was not the first attempt they got the first and fifth ranks. That was the fourth attempt they got the first and fifth ranks. That means what has happened is the knowledge that they accumulated in the first attempt, second attempt, third attempt, fourth attempt has been slowly refined, and maybe within the available time of about 3 hours or 4 hours. They have to sleep, right? After the training. Right? So in that available short time of 2 hours or 3 hours that is available for them, they refined their writing practice. They refined their knowledge, refined their answering technique. So whatever you have accumulated is not going to. You can't write anything and get 1 or 2 marks. Right? That would be the generosity in an academic examination. They know, the teachers know we have not taught anything. Right? But they know that, they have to give a good, this one for their own university. So what they will do is they'll give you some grace marks. Recently say, engineering medical students, postgraduate students have been demanding that there should be grace marks. Now imagine a doctor getting a grace mark and pass it out. Will you give a grace mark to a patient? Is there any grace marks for a patient? If the operation is failure, can you give another grace mark and say, okay, it will be passed? See, collapse of the education system is the collapse of the society. There's nothing like that. Nothing beyond that. If your education system collapses, that means that, it's gone. The society has gone. So what they tell you, please don't listen to. You be happy there, they give you a cup of tea, have the tea, they give you some more snack, enjoy the snack, come away and say, whenever you go there, okay, from this year and out this year. Never follow what they say. You have your own, see, you are supposed to be a person who has some ability to think, right? Now you should think, okay, he says he is studying for 18 hours, is it really possible for him to study 18 hours? When I am doing nothing, I am studying for 18 hours. When he is working, how can he study for 18 hours? This is the rationality that you should show. To my friend, that is the perception I would like to communicate. I think we should leave it a little bit open so that they will know that this is the way to enter. Yeah. Put your close stage, allow me to say. So when you use the word comment, when the word comment comes, you have to make sure that you have to give your own opinion first. All these are called opinionated answers. Give your opinion and give reasons what made you to arrive at that particular opinion or conclusion. So you are starting with a conclusion there. Right? Another one is discuss. Discuss generally means it's a discussion. That means you have to present different kinds of opinions that are there. On any issue, there is no only one-sided opinion. There are several angles to any issue. Right? Suppose if you find that India and Israel are becoming very close, why are they becoming close? Not one angle. Right? One angle is not enough. There are several dimensions to it. One dimension could be a collapse of USSR. We were very much aligned with USSR. We had a 25 years peace and cooperation treaty from 1975 onwards. USSR has collapsed. And with that, what we had is we had a bondage. USSR was against Israel. USSR was in favor of Arabs. So naturally we had to toe that line, one dimension. When USSR collapsed, we are free birds. Agreement is gone. So we have it. Second thing is India want to be a nuclear power. Right? And we have made some explosions. It is a known fact in the international scenario that Israel is one country which has nuclear weapons. But no sanctions have been imposed on Israel. The reason is that Israel is very close to United States. Why United States did not demand is that most of the capital in the hands of in the United States news media is in the hands of Jews. And the Jews, the country of Israel is of Jews. Right? But no sanctions on Israel, but many sanctions on India. So you wanted to change that. How can we change that? Only when we come closer to USA. But the USA directly you can't go. So what we have to do? We have to find a proxy. The proxy is Israel. So why Israel we have gone to USA? Right? Terrorism. Israel is one country that is landlocked by Arabs. And there we have been saying several Fidayeen attacks are there. And in Israel, every citizen is compulsorily serving the army for a while. Everybody will have to serve in the army. We don't have that compulsive army service, but Israel, for its own 7 days war and other war, it has developed a lot of defense technologies. It has been suffering from terrorist attacks. India also has been suffering from terrorist attacks. So we need anti-terror, whatever it is, that knowledge is much more available in Israel rather than in other countries. So we wanted to become global. Israel is a landlocked country. Deserts are there, but you find that it's one country that is very powerful in horticulture, farming. Right? India is a poor country, agrarian country, does not have advanced farming techniques. We needed some kind of a technology. Your drip irrigation. The people so much of fond of talking about drip irrigation is what started in Israel, not anywhere else. Climatic conditions. Okay. So like that, you take several factors.
Water recycling.
Water recycling, yes.
90%.
Yes. Seawater. Water crisis. So like that, on issue there are several. So what we have to do is when you have to discuss, you take a advantageous position and a disadvantage. Both will be there. Positives and negatives both will be there. Right? So in a discussion, what you would do is you would present both. What are the positive aspects and what are the negative aspects? Then if you want to draw a conclusion, you can always say, maybe this is the line that we have to follow, or this is the line that we should not follow. When advantages are more, you say we follow that. Disadvantages are more, then we say maybe we should refrain from following that particular track of development or whatever it is. Say for example, science bane or a boon. Technology is a bane or a boon. If you have to discuss, you have to say both. And then you can say, okay, if this is an advantage, the advantage has to be used in a nuclear energy. That was our first call. We always said nuclear energy is for peaceful nuclear purposes. That's the value that we have achieved. We wanted it only for a peaceful activity. So you give the advantages or whatever it is of nuclear technology, say what we can achieve, and then you say we have a determined this one saying that we'll only use it for this is the way that we are. You are drawing a conclusion and saying that this is what we are going to do. And we say this is reflected even in our military policy or defense policy when we say no first use. So discussion basically means that you will have to present as many dimensions as possible. And if possible, stick to one dimension and say this is the course I would like to suggest. That means you draw a conclusion. If you can't draw a conclusion, just leave it there. No harm done. But when you are building up, you would say, you would highlight the issue. Suppose we talked about India-US relationships. The Prime Minister has gone there for the first time. So what we would say is that we would simply say that, in the recent times, with the change in the international scenario, collapse of the bipolar system to unipolar world, it has become necessary that we should look at our foreign policy and build new friends. That will be our introduction. And then we proceed with it. So your introductory paragraph should be like what we call it as a visiting card, which tells you who you are, what is your name, what is your designation. So what is the issue, what are you going to do, how we are going to deal with it, that's all. And then you elaborate. So the first paragraph, introductory paragraph, don't say introduction, then underline, then colon, then write an answer. Directly go to the issue. This kind of an essay writing is there in your college days, in your school days. Introduction, body, conclusion, inference, etc., etc. Now you are supposed to be grown-ups, adults. Now once the moment I talk of an issue, something comes to your mind, oh, this is the introduction that should be there. So you directly don't mention anything like that. Take the issue directly. Why India and Israel have become very close. That would be the issue. And then we elaborate on the reason why it is done. Okay? That's what we'll have to do for discuss. Then another term that is often used is assess or evaluate. I think one question had been given here, evaluate the performance or functioning of, what is that, Niti Aayog or something like that. How will you evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog? They have given you an answer. Okay? But evaluation means what? Suppose you write an answer, పూర్తిగా వేయద్దు, కొంచెం వెయ్యి, ఎందుకంటే ఎవరైనా వస్తే వాళ్ళకి తెలియట్లేదు పుష్ చేయాలా లాగా. If I have to evaluate an answer, how can I evaluate the answer? If I say this is 10 feet tall, how do you know it is 10 feet tall?
Which is parameter?
There should be a parameter, right? Then you will put the parameter by the side of it and say, no sir, it is only 3 feet, not 10 feet, right? So if you say you have to evaluate the performance of Niti Aayog, what is the parameter for you to evaluate?
And what are the steps they have taken, with what aims they have?
No, you tell me how you have to start. First of all, what are the aims? What are the aims that are there? And then you say what is the performance, right? Now the question is, why are you talking about Niti Aayog? You had something else also. Niti Aayog has replaced the planning commission, right? So when you have to evaluate, what you have to do is, first of all, you have to evaluate it with the PC, first of all. What was the need for scrapping the planning commission? That is the issue. You would say, planning commission has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 some points, and say, therefore there is a need for drastic look at the existence of the planning commission. First reason why planning commission has to be re-examined, the need for existence of a planning commission, is that it has become completely politicized in appointments of members, in agenda setting, in financial devolution. Right? Who appoints the planning commission members? Union cabinet. Union cabinet is owned by the ruling party. So a ruling party person, leader, will appoint only people belonging or favoring his own party ideology rather than really national interests. Therefore, first thing is, these people who have been appointed are somehow or other more sympathetic to the ruling party. And what would be the agenda? Agenda is further also decided by the Union cabinet. Therefore, this agenda, and how is the Union cabinet formed? Is the Union cabinet formed out of all the states? It is only from the members of the parliament. And if you look at the functioning of the emergence of the parliament and union government, you will find that it's a faction. Majority party of the Lok Sabha alone forms the government, that other parties are not involved in it. So basically, Union cabinet is a partisan agency. Am I right or not? It's a partisan agency. It will try to further its own interests. If the BJP is trying to do that, yes. If the Congress is trying to do that, yes. If the communists come to power, they also try to do the same thing. Am I right or not? But national interests, national economic interests, or national socio-economic interests are completely different. They may gel with the party's ideology, but not necessarily the same party's ideology. Therefore, agenda is also politicized. And look at the financial devolution that the planning commission did. You always find that it had more powers in discretionary grants, and the discretionary grants were given to those states which were favorable with union government. So it has led to what is called a tendency of centralization. Right? Federalism and centralization do not go together. That had been the issue that had been there. Therefore, there was an urgent need for reforming planning commission. Further, planning commission had been pursuing, setting down aims, objectives and everything for the government. In the recent times, after 1991, you will find that LPG has taken over, liberalization, privatization, globalization, where the role of the government has declined. When the role of the government has declined, what is the need for having a plan for a small, insignificant role of the government? So all said and done, there was a need for relook at the planning commission. And at the same time, if you dismantle the planning commission, there will be somebody or some agency which will have a long-term perspective. Therefore, it has been replaced to remove these political dimensions, and you have created a Niti Aayog. Now, who are the members of the Niti Aayog? Union cabinet?
Special advisors.
Special advisors? Chief ministers of all states. They sit together and they decide the planning. They decide the agenda setting is done. Planning commission has not been scrapped. It has not been scrapped. Don't think that it has been scrapped. No, it is there. Only thing is, it has been now on the apex. You have a Niti Aayog. So once the Niti Aayog sets the agenda, the planning commission will draft the plans and carry on. Yeah, the routine activity is going on. Therefore, there is a need for that. Now you evaluate. Right? Planning commission is concerned with only sectoral planning, whereas Niti Aayog is now concerned with system reforming. This is much more important than sectoral reform. Say for example, if you are talking about ENAM, Electronic National Agricultural Market, that's a system reforming. Agricultural marketing has been completely reformed. Now a grower for some fruit or a crop in Karimnagar district or some place has an access to sell his product somewhere in Haryana, Punjab or some other place. System reform. Education system reforming. Subsidy system reforming. Health system reforming. Communication system reforming. System reformers. In your software industry or business analysis, is it not? They analyze the business and say what is to be done and what is not to be done. Is it not? No, this has become a system. It takes up the entire study. Say for example, linking of Aadhaar card for banking and other transactions. Now for everything Aadhaar card has become one. Now what is the use? So any account, any number of account, you have an Aadhaar card. The same Aadhaar card. Therefore all can be clubbed together. Your income can be properly assessed. Tax can be collected. Your subsidies can be. Now they are talking about cash transfer. So the role of Niti Aayog has completely changed. Instead of planning for a sector, industry, agriculture, education, etc., it has become much more broader. It has become a system reform agency. So in that way, setting up this, then you say whether it has been performing effectively or not. So always, whenever the word evaluate, assess comes in, you will have to take something to evaluate. Some parameter has to be there. If they don't provide a parameter, you provide a parameter. So if the question says evaluate the performance of planning Niti Aayog, I would say the performance of Niti Aayog can be better evaluated in comparison with that of the previous agency called Planning Commission. Then I mentioned what is done and how it is different from Planning Commission. Therefore, I would say it has got a greater possibility of succeeding in changing, transforming India. That's what is that, is it not? National Institute for Transformation of India. That would be my answer. See how we are. Each word has to be. Then another one is exam. Examinate. Examine. Word examine basically is trying to make you find faults. Close examination. When you have a superficial examination, you find that everything is okay. But when you go deeper, closely examine, you will find there are mistakes in it. That's what we say, in Telugu there is a saying, Doorapu Kondalu Nunupu. Right? The grass on the other side is greener. But when you go closer, you will find that there are so much of spots. So close examination. Examine means it's closely examine. So on any issue, whenever you are talking of close examination, that means, it is to look at the faults that are there in it. Right? And when you find the faults, it is also natural that you have to make some suggestions. It's not just examining.
So here we don't need to write close, only defects.
You say close examination. Say for example, you talk about Panchayat Raj institution, functioning of the Panchayat Raj institutions. Closely examine. So when you closely examine, you don't you simply say broad outline. Panchayat Raj institutions have been created with the 73rd and 73rd Amendment, basically to decentralize authority. Therefore, they will be able to respond very quickly to the needs of the common people. Right? Then lot of developmental work will be passed on through the Panchayat Raj institutions, like the de-established. And now closely examine, you will find that decentralization has not taken place. Right? though you have state local, state financial commission, state finance commission, you find that not much of funds are being transferred. Still they are dependent on Government of India funds. You find that authority has not been transferred, though it says that authority has been transferred. You find that elections are mandatory within 6 months of dissolution, but you find that couple of years are even going on without elections for the local government. You can say Hyderabad Municipal Corporation, so many other agencies where you find that. So what you are doing is, what are the arrangements that have been made and what are the actual scenario that's going on? That will be the defect. So that means, you can simply say, will come to a close examination will reveal that the Panchayat Raj institutions have remained only on paper. The spirit has not taken root. Am I right on that? Is it not your realization that this is what is happening in the Panchayat Raj institutions? Right? This is what is happening, is it not?
Sir, one more note. Again, I'm going to the same point. They say that we should always end on an optimistic note.
Yeah.
If you say that it is only on paper, whether we are sounding pessimistic.
So what you would say? So far it is only on paper. See, that is why you need command of the language. So far it is only on the paper. Let us hope that the new generation of leaders and politicians would realize the importance of the decentralization of authority and take it to its logical conclusions. Okay, speak out. See, our answer should be like in a stiletto. You know what is a stiletto? A stiletto is a knife with, girls, a stiletto means your heels, is it not? When you have long heels, they are also called stilettos. Okay? A stiletto is a knife which has edge on both sides. Your answer should be like that. If you want to prove something, prove it positively, the same information can also be used in a right? You can always have positive. Right? It has brought about social change. That's true. So previously in the Panchayat Raj institution, there was what is called as a co-option of members. SCs and STs could be co-opted. Co-opted means, once the body is elected, I will choose somebody and say, you be a member of the Panchayat board from the SC or ST community. What kind of a person I will choose? Who is loyal and who is obedient, who would not question my actions. That means maybe I'll ask my servant at home to be a member of the Panchayat. So if that fellow goes against me, what I will do? I will remove him from employment in my house. Feudalism. That has completely changed. Now there are reserved seats for SCs and STs. So is that not a change? Now I can't co-opt. Anybody could be elected. It's a democratic process. So there has been a change. So once there was a question saying that, the 73rd Amendment has brought in silent social revolution. Silent social revolution. Silently it has brought about social revolution. These are the points that we take in the right. So everywhere you have to look at, see, you need command of the subject as well as command of the language. Then one more word that I find usually is substantiation. See, clearly some of the questions are like this. This is the 2016 paper, and discuss the essentials of the 69th Constitutional Amendment Act and anomalies, if any, that have led to recent reported conflicts between elected representatives and the institution of lieutenant governor in the administration of Delhi. Do you think that this will give rise to a new trend in the functioning of the Indian federal politics? What could be the answer when they say, do you think? You should either say, yes, I think this will give a new trend. No, the old trend will continue. See? what is a quasi-judicial body? Explain with the help of concrete examples. It's an explanation. So first you have to say what is a quasi-judicial body. Concrete examples means what? Clear examples. Administrative tribunal is a quasi-judicial body. Interstate Water Tribunal, IS, what is that? Interstate Water Disputes Tribunal is a quasi-judicial body. Central Administrative Tribunal is a quasi-judicial body. TRAI is a quasi-judicial body.
Election Commission.
Election Commission is a quasi-judicial body. SEBI is a quasi-judicial body. Regulatory agencies are quasi-judicial bodies. IRD is a quasi-judicial body. So what is a quasi-judicial body? An administrative body that is performing judicial activities is a quasi-judicial body. Explain and then elaborate. See? Another term that is used is critically examine this. The question is also there. In the Indian governance system, the role of non-state actors has been only marginal. Critically examined. My handwriting is not clear, right? But you have the questions. I'll write it clearly for you. I find that the answer booklet that they are giving, the key is very elaborate. There's no point for me to explain it in key. That is the reason I am not touching it. If you have any doubts, any clarification, I will do that. But otherwise, I thought that, as I told you in the beginning, some of you have come late. If you write answers like this, you won't get marks. Because you are overshooting the word limit and everything is there in it. So how to write precisely is the focus. That's what I am trying to do. If you have anything particular to ask me, you can ask me this. No. Now, see what is to be written when you say critically examine? What will you examine in this?
Whether the role of non-state has been marginal.
Yeah. But what is critical examination? You have a governance system, right? When there is a governance system, what is the need for having a non-state actors? What is governance? Yeah, what is governance?
Exercise of political, administrative, and social authority.
Whatever the government is doing is governance. When if there is a governance, why should you have the role of non-state actors? One aspect. Right? Done. The second thing is, has been marginal, has been only marginal. That means he wants the non-state actors to play a very important role, very large role. What is the large role that is intended? What is the large role, or why is there need for a large? larger, greater role. Okay? If that is the case, why it has been only marginal? Why only marginal? What are the reasons that it is playing only a marginal role? Means insignificant role. Why is it playing an insignificant role? These are the things, this is the way you analyze a question and write an answer. And governance system, why do you need a non-state actor? You can define non-state actors later on, but why do you need a non-state actor?
Government cannot be present at every government. There are certain sections which need handled.
Yes, that means government cannot reach every nook and corner. Right? Governance system is there, but there are several pockets which are away, isolated, can't be reached. That is where you need a non-state actor. First thing. Now define what are non-state actors. Civil society organizations, voluntary agencies, cooperative societies, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Right? All these are non-state actors. Right? So one reason is that the government is not able to reach. Second reason is that one individual is not in a position to go and receive the benefits that the government is capable of giving. You can't access. Therefore, you need some kind of an intermediary who can work for a group of people. One person alone cannot ask the government to bend its rules or change its rules or give benefits to it. But a group of people can definitely create a situation where they can make a demand. Therefore, there is need for organizing people to form an association. That is a non-state actor. Usually, what example I would give is that there is a high tension line going, and from there you want electricity in your house. The high tension line has 33,000 kilowatts of energy flowing through it, and you want only 220 volts of power. Therefore, you have a transformer, a substation, etc., etc. Then that 33,000 is brought down to 220 so that you can receive the benefit out of it. Government is a high voltage government. It's not easy. It cannot respond to every single individual. Therefore, it is necessary that you organize yourself into a small groups of people, and you will be able to consumers, say for example, consumer protection. Right? You can definitely pensioners, government employees, trade unions. They are also non-state actors.
Self-help groups.
Self-help groups. They are also non-state actors.
The Naxalites are also non-state actors, right?
They are non-state actors, but they are anti-state actors.
Can we include them in any way possible here?
See, Naxalites, you don't call them as, when you say a non-state, that means they are performing the functioning of the state, but they do not belong to the state.
Okay. Here they are not performing the functions of the state.
They are threatening the state. The existence of the state itself is being questioned. But none of the non-state actors question the existence of the state. They want the state to survive. So that, they can play an important role. If there is no state, then it's gone. As long as the state exists, they are in a position to tell the citizen, you join us, we will help you. So, this is how the voluntary agencies come in. Say, for example, resident welfare associations. Government is giving you so many facilities, but you are not in a position to receive them. Therefore, you form an association, and the association goes and gets the benefits for you. Okay? Then certain things are there. I said government can't be responsible. There are some cases where government agencies are not responding, but people are able to. Say, for example, now the government has taken Harita Haram and plant protection. You've been hearing about one person called Vanajeevi Ramaiah or something. Who was he? Was he a state actor? No, state actor. Who has been concerned? Have you heard of Chipko movement? Who is it? Hemwati Anand, not Hemwati Anand Mahuguna, another Bahuguna. Hemantyanandan Bhavana was a minister, H.N. Bhavana. That's a non-state organization, a voluntary agency, a self-help group, care, aware. Right? But the point is they are becoming playing only a marginal. The first thing is the fear of the government. The government fears that the non-state organizations are against the state. Therefore, it does not encourage. That's one reason. Second thing is, the spread of the non-state organizations is not wide enough. They are localized. Right? Say, for example, in Khammam, there may be a non-state organization which may not have any roots or contacts in Nalgonda. But the same problem might be there. There may be the same problem in Chittoor. There may be the same problem in Kadapa. But they are localized. So naturally what happens is that the role they play is only right. And one more thing is that nowadays you find that, corporates on the ground of corporate social responsibility are adopting some of the non-state agencies, creating their own agencies for their own funding and for their own personal, profitability, enhance their profitability. They talk about brand power, etc., etc. Nowadays you find that whenever there are elections, one agency comes into picture and says vote freely, divinity, or something like that. So what is happening is they are also being corporatized. Corporates are taking over. They are losing their non-state character. Right? And you find that, since they are very small, they do have financial problems. And when they do have financial problems, you have these people who swallow these agencies. Corporates. Not only corporates, other aid-giving agencies are also swallowed. That way what is happening is, they are not able to perform a real or a true role that is expected. This is what we critically examine. So we'll start like that. First, you define what is Indian governance system, lacunas. That means why non-state organizations have become necessary. Then you define what is a non-state organization, how is it organized, or what are the reasons why it's being done. And then you say, what is the role that is expected and what is the role that they are playing and how do they get it. 3 tiers. That is critical examination. Right. Any questions, anything you want to ask?
Sir, in the 4th question in today's paper, what is the value, what is the link between values and this real estate act?
Let me complete this term, we'll come to that. Okay? Let me have some more terms that we can complete that.
Critically analyze.
Critically examine, critically analyze, critically evaluate, they come in the same way. I think that is what it is. Say, if there is a word outline, that means, you have to bring in all the major aspects. But very, very briefly. That means you have to summarize the entire history of that phenomena, but only major events. Right? Suppose you say outline map of India. Right? I don't dare to try the map, draw the map of India because I can't. But at least basic indentations that are there like that should come, is it not? So similarly, it is nothing but to tell you, give a brief outline, sketch the entire development of that very brief manner. So there what they try to do is, what are the aspects that you think are important? Suppose if you have to write, give a outline history or outline of the Panchayat Raj institutions. So you will not go to all the back. First of all, you say they started somewhere in 1952 community development program. They have not been successful. Therefore, attempt to rejuvenate has been happened in 1993 73rd amendment. Then you come out with the outlines. The outline is only a general sketch of that particular phenomenon, but important events have to be taken. Or briefly also, short note also, the same thing. I think usually these are the terms that are there. We will see if there are any other terms that we can explain later on. So you said fourth question, is that? Tell me.
We asked what is the link between values and real estate?
Urbanization has discovered a new frontier of development. It is not a passive or non development, but a creator of value. Value is a preference. Value is a preference. So now what has happened is, people, do they want to stay in the urban area or do they want to stay in the rural area? What do they prefer? Why do they prefer?
Services.
So urbanization has become a preference for the rural masses to come to urban area, migration. Right? So you will answer that question in that particular manner, why it has become preferred than rural India. Services are there, facilities are there, opportunities are there. Right? So you add all these comforts are there. You add all these and say it has become a preferable solution to land in India. So what are the drawbacks? Then what you should congestion, sustain, traffic problems. Then what is to be done? Again, decentralization. So what you do is, if I have a health problem, if say for example in one corner of Telangana, and if I have to come and stay in Hyderabad, I find that more facilities are there in Hyderabad, so I would like to be there nearby a hospital. But the thing is that if the same specialities and specialty facilities are available even in the remote corner of Telangana, I will not come to. So that means educational institutions, hospitals, Medicare, industries, infrastructure, everything has to spread. Only when you bring about balanced regional development, then the pressure on urbanization will be less. But what we are doing is, we are increasing this urbanization. Pressure on urbanization, we are increasing. We are not trying to stem it. I will tell you one small example, I think I would have discussed with you. See, for example, in Hyderabad, in the twin cities, you find that the high-tech city and Hyderabad city are the most posh areas, or whatever you want to call it. Okay? Now, there is a lot of congestion. People, why there is a lot of congestion on these roads going to high-tech city? Because many of the people are software employees. And they are traveling from different parts of the state to this particular, different part of the city. So what is happening is, you have a metro rail going there, you have a bus rapid system going there, you have a MMTS going there, you have a what is called your corridor or whatever it is going there, everything going on that direction. So now what is your preference? Where do you want to live? This is public transport. Again, I would like to live nearby the public transport. So what is happening is, congestion is increasing. Suppose you find that this high-tech city is spread through here. Say for example, somebody is talking about Adipatla or something like that. Somebody is talking about some other corner. Somebody is talking about some other corner. Then what would have happened? And similarly, the same thing example you can apply it for this state also. If these facilities are available, right? But what we are doing is, by providing more and more facilities to the urban area, we are attracting more and more people to the Ultimately, what may happen is that let us imagine that all the people in all these 33 districts of Telangana want to come and live in Hyderabad. What will happen? It can't be possible, right? So it is quite natural that we will have to decentralize. So our urbanization policy should be in such a way that not only strengthening the existing urban pockets or metropolitan pockets, we should also create more and more urban centers. That is the policy, that's what we are trying to do with smart cities. If really the Internet of Things will come, if everything can be done on the Internet, then there is a possibility that we can decentralize. Not only Hyderabad, but if Warangal, Karimnagar, Nizamabad and every district headquarters will become a smart city, then naturally I would not like to come to Hyderabad. Who would live in this polluted area? Right? That's what it is. So you have to, why this kind of a preference is being done? So when you have to examine urbanism, I think that is the question, is it not? Discuss in the context of real estate regulation. And that they have put it on the real estate regulation, but you can add urbanization as described as a new frontier of development. You take that only. Is it a new frontier of development? If it is the case, only the existing urban centers, or you have to expand them elsewhere also. Rural-urban divide. How to bridge the rural-urban divide is the question. That's what you can take. That would be a question.
But mainly they have asked in the context of real estate.
Yeah, that's what it is.
How to analyze how to write the answers.
So what you would say is that, urbanization is preferred. So most of the people would like to come to urban areas. Most of the people who come to urban areas are not even, are gullible people.
So
You can be easily led.
about the irregular constructions.
No, don't mention of irregular constructions. What you call unethical practices by real estate.
Yes, sir, that's right. So we have to regulate by so we have to know the provisions of real estate regulated development plan. And we have to apply.
Some aspects, if you know, that's more than enough.
We have to apply.
Yes. Some aspects. So they have already given, promoted in case of delay in projects and so on and so forth. That kind of things, that's more than enough.
So the eighth question is like in the concept of federation, ULBs also they come under federation. The eighth question.
Number?
8. In the context of
Urban local governments, is it? Yeah, they do.
Does federation stop at state level or it percolate down to?
Federation basically means that yes,
It is subject list.
it has to spread. That's why we say it's the third tier of government, is it?
in 19th question, they asked to write brief note on National Commission for Minority Education Institutions. So what do you have to write here? Brief note is like statistical wise or as the policies or
No, generally why? See, statistics basically don't, not much of statistical information is needed, but statistical information is needed to support your answer. So generally you try to do this. Why? What? When? Where? Who? How? So in a question, what did you say? 14, which one?
19th.
Write a brief note on National Commission on Minority Educational Institutions. Why? What? When, When? Date, year. Where? No. Who? How is it going to happen? Others are answered. Elaborate on balance of time.
So recent Citizenship Amendment Act, where we have to toe the line of the government or we have to take an independent?
So there the government, in this question they have given you all the details, is it?
They have given some principle.
They have given some principles also. What is that principle that they?
Just solely.
There are two principles in citizenship. Just solely means by the soil. That means persons born. Then another one is just sanguine. Sanguine is a blood. By parents or by relations or ancestors. When you are talking of persons of Indian origin, we are calling them Indians because of their ancestors. So how do you get citizenship? This way or this way? I would say both are necessary. If you simply say, if you are there on the soil, then automatically you get a citizenship.